So for your first official,
Start the meeting. We just
can you start the meeting by yourself?
Recording in progress.
An announcement that we're delayed.
Okay. The meeting is a bit delayed for those who are waiting out there. But we'll be probably about 10 minutes before we get started.
Set a time. Announce a time.
Quarter of 9, approximately.
Put on the
November 3rd, 2022 meeting of the ARB. Please take the roll, Adina.
Chair Hirsch,
Here.
Vice Chair Baltai,
Present.
Board Member Thompson,
Present.
Board Member Chen,
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg is absent today. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So are there any members of the public to speak on anything that isn't part of the agenda?
Oh, we gotta do we gotta do item 1 first.
Okay, yeah, I got to do this first. Okay, sorry. I'll get this after maybe the 5th or 6th meeting. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with the option to attend by teleconference or in person. Members of the public may provide live comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comments on that item. Speakers may address the items that are not on the agenda during oral communications portion of the meeting, about to come up. Spoken comments via the computer or smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the board, go to zoom.us//join. Meeting ID is number 965-618-91491. When you wish to speak, click raised hand. To offer comments, use a regular phone. Using the regular phone, 1-669-900-6833. Enter meeting ID 965-618-91491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit 9 on your phone so we know that you wish to speak. Thank you. Do we take a vote on this then?
Next, you have to have the staff report on this item, first item.
Oh, there's a,
Call for Sheldon to introduce the item.
Do you mean about the teleconference,
Yeah.
voting on the teleconference thing?
yeah,
The usual events. Ask for Sheldon to introduce the item.
Sheldon? Okay.
Staff should introduce the item.
Really? You
Is
don't think
there-
we can just take a vote?
Can't we just take a vote on this? Yeah.
You're the chair, whatever you want.
Yeah, let's take a vote.
Okay, I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the use of teleconferencing under Government Code Section 54953E for meetings of the Architectural Review Board and its committees due to the COVID-19 declared state of emergency.
I will second the motion.
All those in favor?
I'd like to address
Please
my
take a
motion.
vote.
I'd like to make a comment on
Oh,
my
yeah.
second. I can
Okay.
only support this as long as there is a declared state of emergency. And I will look for city council to provide further guidance.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll also state that I will support this even if there is no declared state of emergency.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a vote, Medina.
Vice Chair Baltai,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes,
Board Member Thompson,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0.
can I ask, are there any oral communications?
I haven't received any speaker cards and I do not see any raised hands in Zoom. If anyone would like to provide comments, just general comments, oral communications, please raise your hand. Chair Hirsch, there are no raised hands.
Thank you very much. So agenda changes, additions and deletions, there are none. So, okay, we just proceed without that. And Jody, you'll continue to do that.
I think I can whisper. That's about it.
Okay. And then a discussion about meeting schedules, et cetera.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sheldon Ossing, Principal Planner. And we're winding down this year. We just have a handful of meetings left, another one this month, that we have a couple of items on that agenda, November 17th, 3001 El Camino Real, as well as 123 Sherman. We have another meeting on 12/1 and then 12/15, where we have a planned absence by Board Rosenberg. And then when needed and necessary, the ad hoc committee assignments would be made, but there's nothing for today, for instance. And then we have here included a list of projects in the pipeline that would or may eventually come before this board, just for you to know what's out there for us.
Right, and I
I
want to,
did update the status for Sutter because there was a question about that. Sorry, this is Jody.
yeah, thank you. Sutter comments?
I think she was trying to say there's an update on the Sutter project.
Okay,
I'm
yes.
happy to
On
post
the-
to
on
let
the
that go
list.
another session. No, I think it's fine to not ask for that report today, David, unless you feel otherwise.
Yeah, no, I just wanted clarity on that. Okay, well, I want to thank you, Jody. Once again, you did put in the uses of the projects on the list, and that helps a lot, to focus on it. And it's an ongoing list and very appreciated by the board here. So next, we'll get into the first item. So the first item of the day is a resolution, and the only item of the day, resolution authorizing, oh, no, sorry. The meeting schedule. Let me get to the right tag here. And you can have your drawing back. The 1700 Embarcadero Road, new automobile dealership, second formal. Quasi judicial, 1700 Embarcadero Road. Recommendation on the applicant request for approval of site and design review, DEE variance and off-street loading space modification to allow demolition of a vacant restaurant and construction of a new two-story, 31,000 square foot automobile dealership, environmental assessment, addendum to mitigated negative declaration zoning district, CSDAD, service commercial, site and design review, automobile dealership, combined districts. For more information, contact planner Sheldon Singh. That's Sheldon A. Singh, City of Palo Alto.org. So staff report, Sheldon.
Could I disclose first, David?
Yes,
I'd like to disclose that I visited that site earlier this week.
we could hear Sheldon first and then do our disclosures. So let's start that first.
That's fine. I think as long as we do mention disclosures, that would be great later. But thank you, Sheldon A. Singh, for the introduction. Here with the presentation, the applicant is also available after for their presentation. So just today, we're going to talk about a little bit of a background of the project, how we got here. Then we'll have a project overview, some responses to the ARB's comments and direction from the last meeting that we had, as well as next steps in this project. It does require to go on to the council, and then our recommendation. So we have had a lot of discussion on this site over the years. I think this is over 20 public hearings on this site, ranging from a hotel to Mercedes-Benz dealership to a Mercedes-Benz and Audi dealership, now back to Mercedes-Benz again. We've had a preliminary ARB for this project, this recent project in 2021. We had a first formal in June of this year where we got some great comments and feedback. And then we also had a PTC meeting, Planning Commission meeting last week on this project where we received a recommendation from them. This project is completely zoned for an automobile dealership. It does include the CSD, which is a site and design. That's why we're kind of going through this process, as well as the architectural, as well as the automobile dealership combined district that does provide for some unique development standards afforded to dealership applications. And the project does propose to demolish the existing vacant restaurant building and redevelop the site with a two-story dealership. The site itself is 2.5 acres. The surrounding uses include offices, automobile dealerships, and it is within the Baylands Reserve area, but within the private development area, and is also near Highway 101. The requests for the project include the site and design, a variance, which is a newer application and request because of the parking lot shading. There's also design enhancement exception for the build to setbacks. And then there's also consideration of a waiver of a loading space on the site. The dealership itself is proposing to be around 31,000 square feet. That equates to 0.29 FAR. It's well below what is otherwise allowed on the site. Just to orient you a little bit, on that site plan, the drive area between the showroom building and the service building is not counted per the code for floor area. So we're really counting the showroom space, the service space, and the trash enclosure for the floor area ratio. They are proposing a 26-foot tall building. There is a small tower element for a future sign. It doesn't have a whole lot of mass to it, so but it's a little taller than 26 feet, but well within the height limit for the site of 50 feet. The site does include driveways off of Embarcadero Road as well as East Bayshore Road, and there's circulation around the building for customers, for service vehicles to park and inventory. So the idea is to try to not have as much traffic go onto the adjacent roadway for the specific operations of the vehicle besides test drives, for instance. The building itself is a little different than the prior iterations on the site, and in part that this project includes its inventory on the surface parking lots. The other iterations that we've seen have included the inventory on the interior of the building, either through a parking structure or an automatic vehicle storage system, and that's greatly increased the mass on the project. So this building is vastly smaller than the other iterations that we've seen. In addition, because that inventory is now on the parking lot, there is more parking lot area. It's a little more difficult for them to meet the parking lot shading requirements. So we did receive some good feedback early on in the preliminary ARB, as well as the formal hearing comments regarding the multi-use pathway, and also eliminating a row of parking to allow for that bicycle path. And here's a kind of list of the comments that we received from the ARB and direction, as well as how the applicants responded. So with respect to the incorporating the bicycle path, they did include a class 1 bicycle path. That's a 10-foot wide concrete path that's within the public right-of-way. They did consider eliminating a row of parking, which would have been either an inventory or customer parking along the front, but it did not incorporate the change. I think that probably created a domino effect for them and their on-site ability to service the dealership. Another comment was to incorporate more materials on the Audi facing and other office facing facades, and they did make some color changes. The materials board is here, and they did pull back the metal paneling as I think requested by the board, or at least a board member. The other issue is to provide more native trees and plants on site. They did revise the project, and it includes more native trees on the site. One of the comments from the ARB was needed to meet the parking lot shading requirements. They did revise to increase as to the extent that they could. However, it still does not meet the threshold, and therefore variance is requested. And then finally, to provide more interior elevations of the service drive with the wood paneling. They did demonstrate that in the drawings. You can see the perspectives. So on the west elevation, this is a highly visible along East Bayshore. You can see the different materials from the glass, which is a bird-safe glass. There you see the big open space for the service drive aisle, which has the wood paneling on the inside, and that's the service part of the building with the vegetated wall. And you see the ribbed paneling, the different colors there. There's a lot of texture along this elevation. And then likewise along the Embarcadero side, since the building is at a weird angle and shape, you do see kind of perspectives of that other elevation there. But again, you have that glass, you can probably see a little bit of that wood, you do have some of that metal paneling. in colors. The colors are darker, I think, here, and that's the ARB has been okay with that because of the branding associated with automobile dealerships. They're more metallic, they're more darker in general. But along some of the other elevations, such as this is the Audi side, they've introduced some more green colors in the stucco. And then I think the last meeting, there was a door there for the service. Now that's completely open. And then you can see the door into the actual service building, and then the car wash as well. Southeast elevation, this is that faces the office side. Again, you can see it's more of that green color. I think the applicant described to me that when they were out there in the Baylands, that's the color that kind of was more prevalent for them, rather than a beige type of color. And then this, we also can see that the metal paneling was pulled back. So in the June meeting, you can see at the top where that has been pulled back. You see the difference between the more green hues and the gray hues. So some of the key issues that we've identified on the site are compliance with the Baylands master plan, the bicycle pathway, the parking lot shading, the build-to setbacks, and the required loading spaces. Regarding the Baylands master plan, again, there's a site assessment design guidelines that addresses development in the area, although this is in the private area, so it's a much smaller and slimmer amount of guidelines than there are if you're developing in the Baylands proper. But nonetheless, there are a couple here that we want to highlight, and one of it is the project promotes low and horizontal elements. Far and away, this project is low compared to any of the other projects that we've seen on this site. The project uses muted and compatible colors with appropriate materials. As I mentioned, that the dealerships do have some more metallic colors to them, and I think ARB in the past has been okay with that, supportive of that. And then the lighting would be addressed through the conditions of approval to ensure there's not spillover into the Baylands for the wildlife. The images on the left there show before and after. You can't really notice a whole lot other than maybe the orange tile roof of the restaurant kind of going away. But that's to the extent we're just trying to demonstrate that the building is fairly low in mass. So the bicycle path, there's no bicycle lane along that frontage. It just stops at the property line, I think in part because of the extra turn lane, the left turn lane. There's just not space in that roadway to afford that. There are mature trees under those power lines now. Those are PG&E power lines. And there's also identified a gap in the bicycle network. But the project does require a TDM, a transportation demand management. And because the dealership is an auto-oriented use, you have service people going there for services, using their cars. There's not a way to really reduce that single occupancy vehicle trip to 20%. So therefore, we, as a result, this project really needs to construct this class 1 bike path as a means to meet or try to meet the TDM requirement the best that they can. So that was what we put forward. We heard from the ARB to put that path in, and the applicant did come back with that. So we have that incorporated in the plan. It's a 10-foot concrete pathway. As a result, those mature trees, because as you remove that concrete sidewalk there now and do some grading work, it exposes those roots, and therefore those trees would need to be removed. The other issue is the parking lot shading. The code requirement is 50%. The project has upped the shading from kind of the upper 30s to the low 40s here, 41%. We do want to highlight there, we provide that imagery on the left. 26% of the property is encumbered by easements, various easements from PG&E, our own utilities, underground and above ground. And they have various restrictions on what they can do there regarding planting, height of things, structures can't be located there. The other issue is the shape of this lot is trapezoidal. It does come to a narrow point towards the intersection. So it makes that building very awkward, especially for an automobile dealership and trying to get circulation around the site. The project does also plant trees offsite in the Baylands, and those are native. So that's a plus, I think, that will help us out. But we if you were to take out the easement area itself, the remaining parts of the project would meet that 50%. The other issue is the build to setbacks, and we mentioned this many times before, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this necessarily because there's just no way the building will be able to be in that easement area. And it doesn't make sense to have the building close along Embarcadero Road because we want to have that circulation around the building. There are 2 loading spaces that are required for the project. They've identified spaces for those. The actual dimensions of those spaces are spot on, they're good. However, the red space there adjacent to the car wash, if that was used, it would not provide sufficient driveway access space to go around. So somebody backing out of that tandem space there would have to do a multi-reversing turn to kind of get out of there is what we're expecting. So we would support a waiver of that space pursuant to the municipal code. The Planning and Transportation Commission had reviewed this project last week. They recommend approval 6-0 with the following changes. To eliminate conditional approval number 14, and that is the condition approval regarding the Audi improvements, tying this project to those completion of those improvements. The other was elimination of condition approval 19 if deemed unnecessary, and that had to do with a storm drain replacement. We have deemed that to not be necessary. So we can eliminate that. And then also for condition approval 31, it's provide flexibility to that condition that has to do with the repair of damaged pavement during construction. So we would just have the extent of that be determined by the inspector in the field at the time. Okay, so now we get to a really good slide here. I don't have a whole lot of text necessarily, but we are going to talk a little bit more on this slide. So the California Environmental Quality Act is a requirement. This project does meet the criteria for an addendum to a previously adopted mitigated negative declaration. And that was for the prior project in 2019. So we did go through a process to identify issues that do have significant impacts. We have mitigation measures for those. For projects that have some changes to it, like this one is, it's a much smaller project, we can do an addendum. And as long as we don't identify any new significant impacts or mitigation measures, then we don't have to do a supplemental environmental document. So we did need to update our traffic and noise analyses. The traffic study was completed by the applicant. We did a peer review of that. So we had a third party come on board and help us review that. We worked out any kinks regarding VMT, which is the new standard, vehicle miles traveled standard versus level of service. And then for a noise analysis, we had our own environmental consultant do that analysis. We did not have to get that peer reviewed because it's something that we did. However, we did receive correspondence from a neighbor regarding noise. It's the same neighbor from the last time on this project regarding the car wash. And they did retain a noise acoustic engineer in person to kind of peer review that work and did identify some anomalies in that. And so I think we're prepared to, we're not prepared to really address that dispute about the details, other than to say that we can bring that mitigation measure back that we had on that project previously. So there are no new impacts. This is really the same impact. We are proposing to have a modified mitigation measure that would address that same issue. So I do want to read that into the record here. And if there's a motion, we can just incorporate kind of what I said. So the mitigation measures N-1, that's car wash noise reduction. And we would just say that prior to the operation of the car wash, that the project applicant shall implement any of the following noise reduction measures to ensure car wash noise is consistent with the Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 9, and that has to do with noise. And we would suggest that the following measures could be made, which is closed entry doors on car wash when cars are drying, or housing or silencers be installed. And then we would also recommend to add a condition of approval. So there's a little bit of a wrinkle in this project. That project's actually in concurrent building plan check right now. And the reason for that, the applicant can explain, but they really need to get a building permit by the end of the year, or the project would go away. So we are reviewing the project right now for compliance with these conditions that we're still establishing. So we would recommend having a conditional approval that the owner designee provide an updated acoustical report to satisfaction of the planning director, demonstrating compliance with mitigation N1 prior to the issuance of occupancy permit. So that would allow for the building to get built. They'll be able to run their equipment. We could run the noise study with the equipment running, and we can make the necessary changes at that time or recommend those. So I did have conversations with the neighbor about this, as well as had conversations with the applicant. And I think we're on agreement here, but we may hear from them a little bit about this today. Other than that, there are no other, I think, issues that we do with that document. So for the next steps, we have a city council meeting scheduled on December 5th. So we are asking that the ARB recommend approval of the project to the city council, the draft record land use action, approving these requests based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon. Really incredibly detailed and well presented. Can I ask the board, have you visited the site? Any disclosures?
No disclosure. I was out of town this week, so I wasn't able to, but I've visited the site in the past, and I've also reviewed a previous iteration of this project.
Peter?
Yes, I visited the site earlier this week.
I visited the site yesterday then. I do have, now we have questions for Sheldon here. Can I request, what are you asking from us regarding this car wash in particular?
Yeah, I think we're just, we want to update our mitigation monitoring reporting exhibit to include this mitigation measure. The conditions of approval do reference that document. And then we want to enter a new condition, as I mentioned, that they implement that mitigation measure prior to certificate of occupancy.
So you
I
need
want to mention
to,
that's consistent. You know, the other project went through an appeal process, and that's kind of the same condition that we had worked out.
so do we need to have general discussion about the car wash, or can we just ask for a motion to accept the department's recommendation?
I mean, I think that's, you know, the board can discuss any topic that's here within the agenda, but that's part of our recommendation is to include that new condition. So when you're making a motion, you know, please do consider that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions to Sheldon?
I might wait after the applicant presents.
I have a few questions, but if you'd prefer to wait, it's regarding the easement and details about that. Sheldon, could you clarify for me, please? The main high voltage transmission line, the PG&E easement, is noted as 60 feet wide on the plans. And my understanding is that that is the easement that precludes planting of large trees within that easement. I'm just going to state this and hopefully you can confirm it. It seems to me that there's approximately 10 feet, possibly 15 feet to the side of that easement, between that easement and Bayshore Drive, where the applicant is planning to plant trees. And I want to be sure that that is allowed, that there's not some additional easement that prevents that from happening. Are you able to confirm that?
Yeah, so that portion is outside of that PG&E easement. And so those trees could be placed there.
Great, thank you for confirming that. The second thing I'd like to confirm is that the tree report presented in our package seems to be out of date. Is there some plan to have detailed tree information with a
So as I mentioned, that the project is in building permit review right now, and it's being reviewed through our urban forestry team. And I believe they do have some comments. I'm not sure if it's to the extent of submit a brand new report, a tree report, but those are the kinds of things that are reviewed.
I'm referring to the tree disposition schedule, which shows all the street trees is to be retained. And clearly they're proposing to take them out at other places in the application. That's understood to be the application, but does staff intend to have that cleaned up at some point?
So we could ask them to update that. I mean, it would be helpful for the extent of, again, the building permit. What it does show us is that the size of the trees at the time they took the survey, and informs us that what trees are subject to the tree protection ordinance. And I think there's one tree that's being taken down that is subject to that ordinance.
Okay, I'm just pointing that out. The last thing, I'll be quick, is that on the civil plans, C 3.1, there's a series of cross-sectional details. This is regarding the corner of Embarcadero and Bayshore and the bicycle path, showing a series of grade changes in walls, and it doesn't really show the bike path. And again, I'm wondering if there's some plan to make all this consistent. Right now, the engineering drawings and the bike path design and the renderings all seem out of sync. Standing out there, there's a clear grade change difference. And I just don't see the design fully reflecting that. So what is staff's position on how complete or how current all this needs to be?
Yes, thank you. So we did look into the construction documents that are on file, and they do use the same cross sections, with the exception of extending that sidewalk additional 5 feet for a 10-foot path, which is consistent with their plan. The grade hasn't changed in that cross section.
So the cross section shows an approximately a small 1 or 2 foot retaining wall of some kind at the edge of the bike path between that and the dealer parking lot and stuff. Is that actually what's going to be there then? Some sort of retaining wall there?
There's a space. So there's a space between the retaining wall, which is the parking lot, and the bike path. That accommodates the trees the first question that we addressed.
Okay, but you're saying it even in the building permit application, there's no real resolution to how that's going to fit together, or am I misunderstanding you?
The cross sections are the same, with the difference that the sidewalk is extended an additional 5 feet. So that exhibit shows that sidewalk. It's just a shaded rectangular element that's just extended on there. But the grades haven't changed, and the locations of the retaining wall haven't changed.
Okay, thanks for answering that question. That's it, David.
I have a quick question
Go
on one of
ahead.
board
Yep.
members' responses. Peter, your note about the tree disposition, is that looking at C 5.1?
No, on the tree schedule plans or landscape plans, some places are. Let me find the page for you.
Because in the drawing C 5.1, I can see the removal of those trees along that street.
Yeah, sheet T3 is effectively the tree protection plan. You know, you have to put all this tree protection documentation out there. And so sheet T3 shows the formal tree inventory map and then a schedule of every tree on the site and what happens to it. And that's the one I'm commenting seems to be from back in 2015 and is just not current to this application as best I can tell. I've produced a larger blow up of that drawing if you want to make sense out of it. There also seems to be some inconsistency with the labeling of the trees, the numbers on the trees. 1 or 2 trees didn't make sense. One of them had a different number, a couple of numbers on it. And I don't think this necessarily is to hang up the project, but in order to approve it, it's nice to have it be consistent. So I'm just pointing that out to my colleagues, Ozma.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I have an additional question then, Sheldon, and that is, in the past, we have reviewed projects where there are new trees added to an area under the easement issue there, and describe them as smaller trees specifically. And we've had that approved. So has that been thoroughly explored and eliminated? Because as you probably note, there are fingers in the parking lot on that side of the street, and elsewhere there are trees in the fingers. And in this case, there are no secondary trees on the inside. Can you explain why? I mean, just to add to that, of course, it would increase the coverage over the paved areas.
Right, understood. So I think the question is, have we explored adding some maybe smaller trees, maybe such as Western redbuds, for those landscape fingers along the front that include the display and the customer parking?
Yes.
I did have a conversation with the applicant about that. I mean, I think it is possible to do something there. I think it again be very small, like the Western redbuds or something, to the extent it doesn't conflict with any other underground easement. I think there's potential for that. That appears to meet the PG&E guidelines. I mean, those are very small
Okay. Well,
trees.
okay. I mean, we could bring that up in discussion, but can that be achieved? Do you think the decision on something like that during the process of their review to make sure that they meet their deadline?
Yeah, and I think we want to definitely hear from the applicant, their presentation, give them the opportunity to address that.
Thank you. The other question I had was that on replacement, it's a little hard from the drawings to note whether or not everything up to the curb, perhaps even including the curb, would be replaced when they do the paving of the perimeter of the site.
And I think you're speaking to the multi-use path.
No, not specifically only to the multi-use path that separates from the existing paving. Is it assumed that the entire perimeter paved areas will be repaved?
And I think if you're talking about the parking lot, then the whole.
No,
or-
not the
sorry.
park. Clearly the parking lot, the sidewalk. I'm specifically talking about the perimeter of the sidewalk itself.
Okay, so my understanding is that you have the curb, you have the 10-foot concrete path, and then there is a planter area. So we describe that where the
Correct.
trees, for
Yeah.
instance, that need to be planted. And then there's the parking lot. And then when you get to the interior, there's at least a 5-foot landscape area around the parking lot.
So I'm asking if the entire sidewalk on the outside, public sidewalk, is going to be replaced.
Right, that is correct. That would be to the extent of 10 feet. That's from the curb to inboard. The public right of way would be.
In other words, the curb is going to be retained for the
Right.
outside part of it, but that the paving entirely on the inside will be replaced.
Right. There's not going to be a
break.
a landscape break in there.
No,
It's gonna
and
be-
also there's it's not being retained, period. It's new concrete.
Yeah, it's going to be replaced.
Okay, fine. I think Peter's comments are, yes, you want to
We
speak?
need to hear from the applicant.
Yes. Well, I needed to know whether or not that was part of the project or not. Okay, let's move on and hear from the applicant. You have 10 minutes. Please state your name and spell your name for us, please, and then you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. This is Eric Iverson, ERICIVERSEN with Swickard Automotive Group. Very pleased to be here again to be presenting our updated plans for our Mercedes dealership there in Palo Alto. I think staff did an excellent job summarizing how we got to where we are today and the changes that we've made from the previous application back in June. Yes. topic of discussion, with 26% of our lot being covered by easements. The biggest change is obviously the bike path. So we were able to incorporate the bike path along the perimeter, which is replacing the sidewalk. To do that, it is primarily on existing public right-of-way. There's a small section at the corner where it does go across the existing property line. The plans do show that and do show a small dedication of our property to the public right-of-way to accommodate the bike path, or multi-use path, I think would probably be a better way, something better to call that. Other items discussed from the last meeting really is how does this building address the baylands, and how is it or is it not visible from the baylands? And I appreciate staff including a couple of the pictures that actually I went and took immediately, same day, within an hour following our last meeting in June, from the path in the baylands, looking back at the facility, looking back at the existing restaurant that's there. And that's really where I think I noticed that the main part that we could see on the existing restaurant was the red tile roof. And really the predominant colors from the Bayland are those sage greens, olive greens, green grays, just depending on what we want to call it. But yeah, that sort of range of colors. So what we really did when we addressed the revising the design is we did expand the green wall, wrap it around the back part of the building to address the baylands. You can see that in the plans. We removed the metal panels at the back of the building, so that the only metal panels that are on the building that would be visible from that side are the screens of the mechanical units. But the actual building would be more of your typical stucco type paint, where we can employ and paint different colors with the different planes, very typical of trees. Not every tree is the same color. We can adjust the colors as shown on the plans in the different planes at the back of the building. And what's really benefiting us, as staff has mentioned, is that the project is significantly smaller than the previous projects. The size of our building didn't change between the previous application, but we're still almost half the size of the initial proposal. So we're down around 32,000 feet as opposed to over 60,000 feet, and significantly taller for those initial proposals. Cover a few more things here. Some of the questions that did come up regarding the easements and the PG&E easement. That is correct. The primary easement is the 60-foot PG&E easement with the overhead transmission lines. PG&E produces the guidelines, which is why we've limited showing any and all trees there, because they are guidelines and it is their easement. I'm fine adding trees within that area, adding the red buds. I didn't want to include them on the plans that we had submitted to date as far as shade coverage, because those trees are not as much under our control as a property owner, being that PG&E has the right to trim or cut those trees as they feel is necessary for public safety. So the trees that we counted were the trees that we knew that we had control over and provided as much shade as possible. To answer a few other questions that came up, one of them was regarding for the bike path. Yes, the multi-use path will be 100% new paving, not retaining the existing sidewalk, but replacing that sidewalk with new paving. And then the last one that staff had mentioned was regarding any noise from the car wash. As you recall from some of the previous submittals, the car wash building was at the property line. It's now moved farther away from the property line. I believe the edge of the car wash is 45 to 50 feet away from the property line. The car wash is 100% enclosed within the area. We're still going through the process of identifying system, which is frequently the noisiest component of the car wash. And we have very recently identified an alternative dryer that we would plan to use that is within the noise ordinance threshold of below 70 decibels during the hours specified in code, which is traditional business hours. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We're very excited to move forward. I think there's some incredible, unique components to this building that you don't typically see. We will have a very unique Mercedes store here in Palo Alto. Like I said, that you don't see a green wall typically on a car dealership. So I personally am very excited for that. And I'm very excited for using the recycled wood materials throughout the service drive. I've been wanting to do that for a while, and this is beyond the perfect opportunity. Believe it or not, those materials are milled about 20 miles from my house. So it's a great story how they create those materials and recycle them from buildings that were otherwise torn down. They remill them, and we're going to put them back up. So I think it's going to be great. It's going to be a very organic feeling. That's going to feel good when you pull into that service drive. So I'm happy to answer any questions and look forward to any additional comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iverson. Can we bring it back to the,
We need to hear from the public.
oh, yes, okay.
Yes, I see one raised hand. Let me quickly update my timer with
Okay.
3 minutes. And now I see two raised hands. Our first speaker is April Gerguena.
Okay. Speakers, you have 3 minutes each. Let's start with the first speaker then. Thank you.
Hello, hi, this is April Gargania. I work with Alexandria. We have a property over at 2100 through 2400 Gang Road. It's next door to the Baylands Park. We were just curious about how the impacts will be for traffic on Embarcadero Road leading to Gang Road, and also any impacts along Bayshore as well during construction.
Maybe we turn this to Sheldon. You must have done some analysis there.
Yes, thank you. That's the end of the comment for that. There is a condition approval regarding the logistics plan, so we can kind of address how construction traffic would go onto and off the site. Regarding any types of operational traffic, we've reviewed that through our environmental analysis, and does not exceed any of the level of service thresholds or vehicle miles traveled. So it's within normal means.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Are you still there?
Yes, thank you.
Second speaker?
Our next speaker is Ryan Schofield.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. This is Ryan Schofield. I'm an acoustical engineer with Benaclausen. I was hired by the occupants next door to the southeast along East Bayshore Road to review the noise generated by the project, including the car wash. This car wash will use dryer blowers that will be extremely loud. These are like hair dryers, except they're 45 horsepower. Next door is a peaceful office park, including an outdoor sitting area with picnic benches used as an outdoor dwelling area. The addendum to the mitigated negative declaration report published last month has a few large errors. These were discussed yesterday with City Principal Planner Sheldon Asing. The first error is an incorrect method to determine the allowable noise level created by the project, included in policy N1 by the city. This is dangerous not only for the project, but also for future projects, because this method is currently published online for the public to see. The project assumed that the ambient noise level at the project site to be a 24-hour average sound level. The municipal code defines ambient noise to be, quote, the lowest repeating sound level over a 6-minute period, end quote. This is very different louder than current conditions, which means the project is assuming that the noise created by the project can be 3 times louder than what municipal code actually allows. In this case, 56 decibels, not 70 decibels as just stated by the applicant. If this project is built to the current plans, the project will create noise 3 times louder than what municipal code allows. In the spirit of moving the project forward, there are a couple simple, effective changes to the project that will allow the project to be built, comply with municipal code, and preserve the peace and quiet of the neighbors. First, a noise barrier, which can be a simple wood fence, can be added at the property line at the location of the existing chain link fence. Second, the car wash can operate with doors to the car wash closed, both on exit and entry. These 2 simple changes will significantly reduce the noise exposure to the neighborhood and bring the project within noise code limits. I'm available to discuss these errors and changes in more detail. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Hirsch, that concludes public comments for this item. Oops, sorry, I actually see one more raised hand, Gemma Lim.
So, okay, one more we'll allow in here. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and spell your name. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gemma Lim. That's Gemma and Lim, Lim. I am the property manager of the neighboring office building, 2479 East Bayshore Road, Palo Alto. Ryan Schofield, who earlier spoke, is a sound consultant that we hired. And we had a discussion with the principal planner, Sheldon, yesterday. And we are very concerned that the car wash noise, if the existing conditions are retained, will actually threaten the quiet enjoyment of our tenants, who are mostly small business owners. So we hope that the commission will seriously consider to further discuss this noise issue, and that we can get into a conversation about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I think we bring the topic back to the board.
Typically, the applicant is allowed
To
response.
answer, yes. Do you want to respond? Actually, that's a good time to respond to the issues that were raised, and better do it. Thank you.
So, yeah, again, this is Eric Iverson, applicant here for the Mercedes project. So we are definitely concerned about noise, and I think when we had I discussed with staff, we commit to meet the code. I do believe the noise consultant was in error with ambient reading. I believe the code is set up to read ambient noise at completion of construction when there is other noise occurring on site. As opposed to an ambient reading today on a vacant site. Obviously, a vacant site is going to be extremely quiet. And the second part is there is a section of the code that permits for commercial. It's a specific exception that permits that noise up to section 9.10.060 that provides for a general daytime exception that allows any noise which doesn't produce a noise level exceeding 70 dBA at a distance of 25 feet. And I believe that's what we will definitely, I know that's what we'll meet. The current blowers, like I said, that we are researching do not exceed that amount. So we'll do everything in our power, and I think we have to make sure, and we'll definitely meet the City of Palo Alto code requirements.
Thank you. Any other required comments from the outside here?
No.
No. Well, let's bring it back to the board then.
David, could we ask staff to clarify I know Sheldon dove into the issues about the sound, but I didn't fully comprehend, Sheldon, what you were proposing regarding a condition of approval. Would you mind if he explained that more carefully to us? Or maybe you explained it carefully. You explained it so I could pay more attention. Thank you.
Yes, Sheldon.
Yes, sure. I mean, we're not trying to do an analysis today, noise analysis or anything like that. I mean, what we ultimately want is what everybody wants is for the project to be consistent with the code, and that's under MISPA Code Chapter Title 9. And so there's really definitions of local ambient. There's what the thresholds are for commercial projects. There are exceptions for daytime uses as was thrown out. So our point is that this is not a new mitigation, a new impact. We have mitigation from the prior project. We want to bring that back into this project. We just want to generally state that it needs to be compliant with our sound standard. And we suggested some ways of how they could do it. You heard a little bit from the neighbor's sound technician about having closed doors, maybe a fence, maybe that would work out. I mean, we're open to different possibilities of how that could happen. The condition of approval that we're proposing would be one that would just guarantee that the applicant were to conduct a new acoustical study. The city would then approve that study. It'd have to be consistent, obviously, with our code, and it would be done prior to the certificate of occupancy for the project.
Would it be reasonable to add to that condition of approval that you allow the neighbor who's concerned and possibly her consultant to review or to chime in on that before you approve it? You're going to get some sort of acoustic study. It seems that the first one we got wasn't entirely kosher. Maybe is that something we can do? Is that in the system that we could just ask them to take a chance? Or
I mean, I was thinking, I know like yesterday I had conversations with both parties, and definitely it seems like it would be helpful to encourage there be some discussion about what the study is, what the baselines are. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of back and forth. I think there's some encouragement about that. I don't know if we can require people to come together, but I think as we go through this process and we receive these documents, I mean, yes, it would be transparent. We're not going to not have the neighbor read the study or so and going forward.
Okay, well, thanks for answering that question.
Yeah, so I want to clarify with staff. So is it something, so for the current proposed car wash location is something that is achievable to meet the city's requirement for the noise level, instead of maybe in the end they have to relocate the car wash location and then the design will got changed?
Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of solutions to how to solve this problem without having to move the car wash. I think there definitely, what we've heard is that there are a lot of ways that they can muffle and attenuate the sound. Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've heard is that the doors would be closed while there's drying. The drying is the biggest generator of sound for the facility. So they have automatic doors that come down. That was in the prior project. Yeah, there are many things that could be done.
Thank you.
All right, so let's bring it back.
I do have one more question for the applicant. I just had a quick question about the color palette. On our elevations, the different greens are noted light, medium, and dark. And we have actual names now on the material palette with sea salt, rosemary, and dried thyme. And so I think I just wanted to clarify between rosemary and dried thyme, which one's the medium and which one's the dark, I guess.
I smile when you ask that question because I personally researched those colors and I don't know off the top of my head which was the medium and which was the dark. Those seem to be the three colors that most represented what was currently out there. I would have to do a little email search. give me a minute. I'll do my best to come back with it, but yeah, I don't know off the top of my head which was the medium and which was the dark.
Okay. All right, I'll just keep that in mind. Thanks.
Well, then I think we finished the questions unless there's one more. Okay.
Yeah, there are some materials that I'd like to clarify. So on sheet 06, the exterior elevations. So the wall material above the service entry, it noted as the charcoal ribbed metal panel, but graphically it shows different from the walls next to it. So I want to clarify, is it something different or is the ribbed metal panel? Sheet 06.
Eric, I think that's to you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was. Are we talking the? Is that the roof of the service drive?
Yeah, the wall above the service canopy.
So as we are entering, as we're entering the.
I want to clarify which material it is because on the two walls next to it, it seems like it's the ribbed metal panel, but graphically, the middle section is just differently showing from the two sides of the wall.
So I think I'm showing it on the screen. Is that the correct one, Board Member Chen? Is that the
Yeah,
elevation?
right.
I could blow this up.
Yeah, you see the area above the.
Oops, did I do something wrong here?
I think
Yeah.
are we talking about the underside of the canopy maybe?
No, the wall above it. Yeah, yeah, you can see on this elevation above the. Can you blow it up?
I think the text says charcoal rimmed metal
Yeah, but
panel.
it seems like it's.
The hatch
Is it flat or is it ribbed metal panel?
That yeah, the area above the reclaimed wood siding is the ribbed metal panel.
Right. How about the wall on the left of that part?
That is a smooth metal panel.
Oh, okay.
That's somewhat traditional in automotive where the smooth panel will be over the showroom area and a ribbed panel is frequently over the service area.
Oh.
Can I chime in on that? If you go to rendering on sheet 15, that shows this condition with continuous ribbed panels over the whole thing, I believe. It's a little bit tough to tell, but yeah, it's a continuous ribbed panel effect. Yingxi, do you see what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, yeah.
So to the applicant, you're telling us that the surface above the canopy shown in rendering on sheet 15 is actually a smooth panel, not a ribbed panel?
Again, it should be a smooth panel over the showroom, yes. But again, if there is direction today, we can revise that.
It's
Thank
true.
you.
Even the rendering on page 16 is showing it ribbed as well.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification.
I have one more question on the section on sheet 09. So on the upper section, there is a white vertical seam between the wood panel. So well, what is that? On sheet 09, the east to west wall section 2.
It's the salon grid line K.
L actually.
Oh, L.
Yeah. Oh yeah, K and L. Yeah. There is like a white vertical piece that going from floor to the structure.
Which drawing are you looking at, Yingshi?
Sheet 09.
Sheldon, would you be able to bring that one up?
Yeah, let me try that. Okay, I think this is it. Let me try to blow it up. Okay. Would you like me to go left or right on this screen, or?
So I think if we can you, I'm not sure what the question was again.
Can you see the section on the upper one? There is like the white vertical piece in between the wood panel. Sheldon, could you please move up a little bit so that we can refer to the grid line?
Okay.
It's kind of the break in the, there's like a break. In that
Is this it
elevation.
where my,
Yes.
this line, okay, Eric,
Yes.
this white line.
Yeah,
right,
this
right.
one.
Yeah.
You're seeing the wall there because we're in a section. So that white line, the way I'm reading that, is an interior wall.
I think there was a time when that is there a garage door that's blocking that access now?
There is not into the service drive. I mean, that could have been left over from the garage door, but that does not seem like that's in the right spot.
So can you confirm that would just be a smooth wood wall the whole way?
There shouldn't be anything interrupting that wood wall. So I think either that's because we're seeing this in a section that we're seeing something where they cut the section on the wrong side of the wall, but no, there will not be anything interrupting the reclaimed wood there.
Okay, thank you for your clarification.
Sorry, I just have one last clarification question. I know it's like almost 10. So just to clarify, for the bike path to happen, that row of trees is gone and are being replaced by different trees. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Well, okay, we've had a lot of question period here, so I think if there's no more, let's see if we have some general comments one by one here. Who would like to start? Anybody?
Sure,
Okay.
I'll keep mine really brief. Okay, so thanks so much for the application. what at least I've seen so far proposed for this site. I do agree with the assessment that this is compatible with the design guidelines for the Baylands. So it is low, it is horizontal. The palette, I like kind of how there's a balance between the identity of the Mercedes-Benz that is furthest away from the Baylands, and then it sort of feathers into a more neutral, natural palette that is more compatible with the Baylands identity. I really appreciate that the glass is bird safe. So thank you for taking those comments into consideration. And in general, I can support this project. I think the items that we've discussed regarding acoustical concerns seem like they have mitigatable solutions. And one thing that does give me pause is I know last time we talked about picking between the bike lane and the trees, and I know it's a tough decision because I think I remember those trees being in good condition. And the shading is also of concern because we're sort of adding more pavement and not mitigating it in some way. So I understand that the easement makes that complicated. So I'm open to solutions for that, but I think the applicant is showing planting and as much coverage, and I would support trees that have more canopy coverage if they're feasible in that location. But in general, I can support this design. I will say, as far as the materials that were just discussed, the ribbed parapet across the whole way, as shown in the renderings, appears, in my opinion, to be a better choice than if it were solid. So if that's up for discussion, I would propose that we move forward with that. Yes, in terms of the light green and the dark green stucco, I've made some presumptions since it's not clarified, but I would just propose that the dark green is rosemary and the medium green is dried thyme. And I think that might work out. Okay. Yeah, so I'll keep it short and sweet. Yeah, I think this is sort of the most appropriate proposal we've had here in a while. So thank you.
Thank you. I support Board Member Thompson's comments, and I can support this project for recommendation today. To my colleagues, my concern is whether or not we want to see this before us on some sort of subcommittee. There's a number of items that just give me cause for concern. I'll start with the obvious things we just pointed out on the elevations. The colors not being correctly identified, the elevations are not consistent, the section cut is obviously just sort of sloppily done. How much do we want to control that or see that come back to us? I think either way, the building will be handsome and meet the requirements, but we're setting a standard here. I'm concerned about the trees. Again, we're making a deal to take them out to get the bike lane, but there's so little documentation in a formal sense of what's actually coming out. And there's a whole row of street trees there. And our city has a history of public boards or public entities removing a whole bunch of trees. And it's not entirely clear to the public. A member of the public looking at this could understandably think the trees are being saved. It says so on the list. And I'm concerned that it should be clear and complete, and it's not. So do we want to ask that to be somehow be clarified by staff as a condition of approval, or have it come back to the board for review? That's more my question on that. The same thing applies to the bike path at the corner there. If you really dive into it, put a magnifying glass on this so you can read it. There's a 10-foot bike path curving at a sharper radius than the sidewalk. And somehow those two are merging or not merging. There's actually about a 2-foot grade elevation across that corner from the street onto the property. How is that being resolved? Do we really want a 1-foot or 18-inch retaining wall, concrete wall next to a bike path as you're going around a curve? The same question in my mind applies to the edge of the bike path next to the street. Is there any detailing or marking? How is that done to ensure it's safely put together? think the project meets our standards, but it's the kind of thing I'm wondering if we want to have it come back to us just to check, to see what the final solution is. As Sheldon mentioned, it doesn't seem even in the permit drawings that they've really resolved this yet. And I'm confident it will ultimately be resolved, but do we want to have our finger on that one? I'm concerned on a higher level regarding the trees and the easements, because what they're proposing is to replant a number of large trees, 36-inch oaks and maples, between the new bike path and the edge of their parking lot, which is somehow not in the main PG&E easement, but it's within a bunch of other easements. In the past, my memory was that we had to choose one or the other. We could not put large trees back into this easement. This seems to be proposing to do exactly that. And to me, that makes a big difference. We're cutting down these street trees, but we're replacing a bunch of them. And I'd really be sorry to find out later that no, actually that couldn't happen because those trees were within some PG&E easement. And I don't see a whole lot of clarification here. I don't receive a strong sense of confidence that that's actually the case. And so I'm feeling like I'd like to have that confidence that the trees that are proposed on this plan can actually be planted. And so I'm just throwing it out as a concern. I'd like to quickly address the issue of the noise in the car wash. I think our standard should be that this project needs to meet the sound ordinance. So at the property line, there's a certain amount of sound they're allowed to have. I'm uncomfortable stipulating now that they have to put doors on the car wash or build a fence. I think that should be a product of whatever sound study they have that shows what the mitigation should be. Putting doors on an automatic car wash is a big deal. It's not easy. It significantly limits the functionality. We had come to that solution, or the applicant had, when the car wash was at the property line. This car wash is 40 feet away. It seems to me that it's not fair of us to just require that now as an absolute. Rather, they should do a sound study. They should propose a solution that works for the applicant that meets the city requirement. And I think at best, we want to be focused that our condition of approval needs to be sure that this does meet the city sound requirements. To that effect, I'm concerned. The applicant, the neighbor seems to have hired a sound engineer whom I'm familiar with, who points out legitimate concerns to me about how this sound study is being done. And I can fully understand that maybe the staff doesn't have the bandwidth to really dive into it. But if it is that level of inaccuracy, the difference between 56 decibels, as the sound consultant stated, and 70, as the applicant stated, is pretty significant. That's a large difference in sound. And there ought to be some process whereby the city ordinance is enforced and kept. So I don't know if, like I mentioned earlier, if it's possible in the condition of approval to just offer the applicant a chance to review the official sound study and work with the city staff. That's rather unusual, I suppose, to do that. But somehow we should just make sure that the city ordinance is being met. Ultimately, that's my position on that. Okay, my last thing is regarding the variance for the parking lot shading. And I think it's absolutely acceptable that they would ask for a variance. This is, to me, what I call a textbook case of a variance. A variance is when you have something unique or special about your property that doesn't apply to everybody else. In this case, having a 60-foot wide PG&E easement for a high voltage transmission line across your property is a pretty unique situation. And clearly, that affects the ability of putting trees in a parking lot so they can't meet the shading. What I'm concerned about is that our variance findings that are proposed by staff includes a bunch of other stuff, like a trapezoidal shaped property. And to me, that is not something that's so unique. It's not that oddly shaped a property. And we're setting a precedent that because your property is oddly shaped, you can get a variance on a parking lot standard. And I think, to me at least, the singular thing that allows this variance is the PG&E easement. And so I'd like to strike other items from the discussion or the rationale behind it. So I can propose in detail as we get to making a motion, but if the board supports that, I'd like to have us approve or recommend approval of the shading variance just due to the PG&E easement. That summarizes my comments. Thank you.
I'm in favor of this project. I agree with lots of what my colleagues just mentioned. We'd like to see more details on how the sidewalk designed, the elevation change. And also agree with what Board Member Thompson said about the front elevation materials. I think from what we saw on the perspectives, the ribbed metal panel would looks better compared to the flat one. And also for the car wash, yeah, I think we definitely want to see acoustic report, more detailed information on that, and make sure it will meet the city's code, and also it is feasible to the applicant, to the business owners. It doesn't affect the daily operation from your side. So we want to find a solution that works both for you and your neighbors. So generally, I think there are lots of improvements compared to the last submission. So I think it's really good. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, fellow board members. So I generally support the comments made by the board, and in particular, I'm more concerned as well about the environmental issue, the nature of this project as it uses most of the site for storage of cars, as they are adjacent to the Bayshore area. So Medina, maybe you could put up the first series of slides. Yes. Okay. So, we noticed that I was there yesterday and was concerned about the possibility of trees, et cetera, growth underneath the utility lines there. And as you see here on the perimeter of the adjacent site, there's a very tall hedge. What's the second one? Second slide, Medina. Second one from this series. No, second, next slide. All right, so a long view of a Gang Road parking lot from the person who spoke today. You can see there's a number of lower trees which are under the line, and they seem to be allowed in this location. And it's right under the high wire lines. Next one. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So again, larger trees that are on the adjacent site, and then in the perimeter, you can still see some smaller trees that are again under the line. So it seems clear that it's one of those things which, even if these are historical trees for many years, that they are there, and evidently any repair work can happen around a lower tree. Certainly a lower one, as mentioned by Sheldon earlier, would be reasonable. Okay, so that's fine for that. Next series. So this is looking again at the trees in the present location, not in relation to the electrical line. These are the ones which would be removed. And they're right immediately adjacent to the sidewalk. And there is no planting in the area between the trees, no ground cover. Next slide. electrical pole that is on the perimeter there. I can't recall if I've seen that pole, but it looks to me like it's going to require relocation as the sidewalk is widened. And I bring that to your attention because that's going to be an important item of lighting, et cetera, for the street, and needs to be specifically relocated. And perhaps you can tell me if it has been relocated. But again, I'm talking about the relationship between the trees and the cars. They're immediately adjacent to the street and even though the cars will be pulled back in the actual plan, I think this area needs to be treated differently. What's the next slide, please? So here's plantings which are across the street at the Stanford Medical Building. And you can see some ground covers here that do sort of shield and make a better relationship to the car itself. And next slide and final slide. There are those in the background, but there's always the variety of possibilities in this median area, which could soften the relationship to the building. You know, we tend to look hard at our buildings and the materials of the buildings, but we need to look at the perimeter of the site and make sure, frankly, the renderings are not at all softened. There's just a ground cover that doesn't even look real in the renderings. And this gives you a sense of what is possible that could be planted at the perimeter and soften the edge. So that's all for that. Except to mention that as we move forward, and I want to say that I think that the building is really well designed and really beautifully sited, takes good advantage of the corner issue and the way in which the circulation works around the building. The materials are really well chosen. I think with the comments made by our board here, they'll be just terrific when they're finally when the building is finally built. So I've avoided talking about the design really because I think it's well covered here. In terms of the car wash, this car wash is significantly further from the building than the previous one, and they're very early application. And if it's up to you to prove that it works by the law of it, by the regulations, I think it's reasonable, actually, very amateur opinion is that 70 decibels from the distance to the actual building is going to be just very far away. So I can't imagine the sound penetrating that far, but you could do your study up to the line of their very building. And I don't know if one is required to have that kind of environmental controls over a parking lot, which is most of the distance between your building and the neighboring building. So it's just an amateur's opinion about it. However, it is up to you to meet the regulations, and I think it seemed like it's reasonably possible that you will meet the regulations, only you have to prove it. I don't see what would be wrong in sharing some of that information with them, with the adjacent owners in time when it's done. But it isn't something that I imagine is too urgent, except that it has to be an answer that is a reasonable one. I would encourage more of a commitment on the trees, on the fingers that come into the parking lot at that side, so that you can answer the issue of the paving amount that needs to be covered by the shadow of the trees. I don't see what is the reason why you wouldn't put that in the documents at this time. It would give us great assurance that they're going to be put in. And I'm pretty positive that you'll be able to get an approval So I would like to see them on the drawing. I agree with my fellows that the corner where the 10-foot wide deep bike path diverges from the main level, there's a significant raise in the land at that point, and it has to come back down and meet again, and it doesn't really show up in a scale which we could see with elevations drawn the way we really normally would need to see it. This is one that might take a little more time to make it very clear, and maybe I would wonder if we wouldn't all want to see this one brought back to a committee. Really up to you to get it done so that you don't lose your deadlines. But I think it's a severe enough issue with enough detail missing at this point that we really need to see more information about how all of that paving works relative to the elevations. I think those are my major concerns. Again, I want to congratulate you on a project well designed in so many different respects. And really look forward to this building at the corner. Certainly going to be much, much better than anything else we've seen before. And with that, I'd like to see if anybody would like to make a motion.
I'd like to ask staff a question regarding having this come back on subcommittee. Is it subcommittee or ad hoc committee? But regardless, does that affect their entitlement process in a negative way?
So the project does go to the council after this. So the question is whether we're asking them to come before that date to the subcommittee or afterwards. It sounds like it has to be before.
The council is scheduled to hear this within a month, right?
Yeah, December 5th.
And to the applicant, then, is it possible to address these concerns about sort of tidying up the package in advance of that sufficiently that we can do it? Or Jody and Sheldon, is that just unrealistic?
We've got one in between, right? We've got a meeting in 2 weeks where we could review any ad hoc committee things. The list I have is clarifying the bike path section, the elevations for the metal panel, better definition on materials on the elevations, considering trees with larger canopies in areas that they can be planted for better shading protection, and then also to confirm that the trees can be planted in the locations that they've been noted next to the bike path.
And low-level planting in the ground areas between the two paving areas, the parked car paving and the perimeter sidewalk.
You mean like low-level planting in between the trees? Yeah, right.
Yes.
Agree.
You're talking the fingers in the parking area where they could put some rosebuds or something.
Yes, also
Yeah,
a double layer of trees.
Yeah, the applicant said he's okay with that.
Sorry, through the chair. I think we were just conversing a little bit, and I think the reason we had mentioned that the subcommittee before the council is because of housing projects. The state law SB 35 is streamlining things. I think with commercial projects, it is different. So I think there's opportunity to have it after the council meeting. So if that provides a little more time for the applicant to kind of address some of these issues.
No, that's good. I think a little more time is needed. All right, so then we can state in a motion. I accept that somebody would like to make that.
You want to do that?
I think you
Subject to the finding, subject to the conditions of approval noted in our report, with the following to return to ad hoc committee. One is clarifying sections along the bike path indicating changes in elevation. So that's one. Clarifying that the trees adjacent to the bike path can in fact be planted. In that same vein, also displaying more low-level vegetation planting in between trees, and also outside of constraints, easement constraints, to consider trees with larger canopies to increase shading,
Fingers.
such as a double layer in the fingers of the, that's such a weird way of saying that, the sort of parts of vegetation in between parking spaces. Additionally, to come back to us would be updated elevations, clarifying materials that will be on them, and specifically that the ribbed panel expanse and the green color clarifications. And lastly, and I think this is already in the conditions of approval, but that the acoustics related to the car wash would meet the sound ordinance.
Right, just to the maker of the motion, that would be a new condition.
Is that not in the conditions of approval?
We have a condition that refers back to the mitigation monitoring reporting program, but we want to have that condition about doing the acoustical report, getting approval of it prior to certificate of occupancy.
I see.
If that was something that. And then.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing also, I think there was a question in our pre-meeting that never came up in this item about loading and unloading, that we don't have a condition approval for not allowing loading on the street. I think there might be something in the municipal code already, but just specifically for this project, just to make it very clear for people, we would like to have that where loading, unloading of vehicles would not be permitted adjacent to the property.
Adjacent to the property or adjacent to the building itself?
I think they can do it, if they can do it on the site within where they're permitted to do so, loading spaces, that's fine. But we're just saying on the street. We don't want a situation where
Okay,
this
yeah, that did come
big
up.
truck
I raised
that
it.
blocks
Yes.
a lane or something like that without authority.
Okay,
And that's not currently in the conditions of approval?
no,
That is not, we did check
No.
that, it's not there.
Was that addressed by the planning commission? Did they ask for that condition?
no.
I don't believe they did. I'm trying to
It's
remember
really
now.
their purview.
It is.
But
true,
we're
that's
asking that as part of this.
It's common sense coming from staff.
Yes.
We're asking, I mean, we're going to ask you here or we're going to ask you about the council. We're just trying to have
Sure,
a complete
that makes
package for the
sense to me,
council.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I raised the issue in our meeting and okay. That's important, I think.
I'm happy to
Sure.
second that motion, but I would like to propose 2 changes to it. So I think I can do that as a seconder. Is that how?
I think you would second and then propose friendly
Okay,
amendments.
so I'm going to second that. The first amendment I propose is that the neighbor be given an opportunity to review the acoustic study that's prepared regarding the car wash. Not approve, but just to take a look at it.
Okay,
If you're okay
I
with that.
accept that.
Okay. The second one is I'd like to propose some changes to the wording regarding the variance findings. So when I look at the variance findings on packet page 36, essentially the first paragraph of justification that starts with the applicant requests a variance, et cetera. I'd like to strike the second sentence where it begins in the case of the subject property all the way through to the end of it, leaving the last sentence, ending with subject site. That whole thing describes the trapezoidal shaped property. I would also like to strike the first, second, third, the fourth paragraph. Automobile dealerships typically function with either a larger building, et cetera. That is basically diving into the shape of the property shading requirement. And then I'd like to have staff clean up the easement is 60 feet that we're talking about. That's the issue, not 80 foot. And then the very last paragraph, I think, should be struck. This is because they're putting in a bike path, that's why they're getting allowed to be exempt from the parking shading requirement. Again, the goal is to just strictly justify the variance because of the PG&E easement. So that's my second suggestion.
So I'd like to hear what staff has to say about those three.
Yeah, I think we can definitely strike the shape of the lot. I think just to clarify about the easements, there are some easements that are subsurface. So understanding that we can't have trees locating easements that are associated with, say, the storm drain. Like it's not a good practice to do that.
To my colleagues, almost every property has some easements. I don't think that should be a de facto justification for a variance from parking shading. This particular easement, the 60-foot swath of high voltage lines that precludes large trees, is a justification to my mind. That's what I'm asking us to come to closure on, if there is consensus on that.
Do you feel like the storm drain easement doesn't count as justification?
In and of itself, not necessarily. I think designers have a lot of options to meet code requirements, and every site has some restriction and easement or issue. I would hate to set the precedent that any easement is considered a unique enough situation to allow a variance of something. Variances, to me, are pretty distinct, and I'd like to hold the bar pretty high. And again, to me, it's that large high voltage line is a pretty high bar. So I'm just asking for us to sort of hold the tight line on that if there's consensus on it.
Just through the chair. So we just want to make sure that, and we hear the vice chair's concerns about this, and we can relate that back to the director, who will maybe look at these findings and before we go to the council. But there's certain purview that the ARB has versus which are more architectural related in nature. But I think definitely we hear your concerns about that.
Well, a comment to that would be that Vice Chair Bolte thinks that these things do affect architecture one way or another.
I'm looking at Ozma sitting here thinking, and I want to make it something that we can all agree on. If we just say that we ask staff to reconsider the wording of this variance finding.
I don't want to claim to know the nature of these easements in depth. You know, I know that we have a 60-foot easement. You know, we're hearing from our planner that there's a reason that they're calling it an 80-foot easement because of other easements that I don't have intimate knowledge of. So I don't feel comfortable about changing that number necessarily. I'm okay to strike the text in that first paragraph. And I'm okay to strike the paragraph that starts with automobile dealerships. But everything else I would not support striking yet.
So can we just not get into the details? I think the reconsider is a good language that staff will reconsider.
Oh, reconsider the variance findings language.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I think
I'm
that's a
okay
good
with
way to
keeping
put it.
that a bit
You're
more.
okay with that? Okay,
Yeah.
let's make it so we're just going to ask staff to reconsider
Consider the variance
language of
language.
variance
Yeah.
findings.
Okay.
So with those two, my second of this motion stands.
Okay. All right. So motion's up.
Yeah. So, Medina?
Vice Chair Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
We don't have minutes to review. I think, can I entertain a motion to end the meeting? Yes.
Is there any comments or questions or announcements?
Announcements, okay. Do you have any?
At the next hearing, you wanted to talk about objective standards.
it isn't part of the look forward schedule here on what is on that meeting, but yes, I want to announce it, that Commissioner Chen and myself have been working on townhomes specifically. We will probably not get back to discussing the entire objective standards, but rather would focus on townhomes. We're putting together a presentation for the next meeting. And this is just to let you all know that we'll bring that forward for your consideration. Okay, can we end the meeting? Motion? Second? All those in favor?
We don't need a motion.
We don't? Okay.
You're the chair. You can end it.
Okay, that's it. We're done.